Tonight we are discussing queer parenting. I am a parent of 28 years, going on 29 years. I have 3 children, ages 28, 20, and 18. I recently got married to my partner of 9 years. Her name is Kenita Stringer Stanback, who is a librarian at the University of California in Santa Barbara. And tonight we're going to be discussing the intersections between being a student, being queer, and being a parent. So the first part of our discussion is really just going to be some slides that I have to share for you. And then the second part of our discussion will be a chat between me and 3 other parents that I know, Charisse Lovett, Chelsea Earls, and Lou Gent. If there are any questions, I'd like for you to hold them until maybe the end. I'd like to also say that we are going to be recording, and if you need anything, please let us know, particularly accommodations. I invite you to chat. I invite you to get up if you need to and walk around, to stretch, to laugh, to sigh, to do all the things that you need to do. This will be very informal, and we will begin soon. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, if there are no questions, then I will share this slide and we can begin. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so let's just go over quickly some main pillars of parenthood. Parenthood is a wonderful experience, but for some folks it can be a little daunting, and for some folks it could be a walk in the park. When we talk about parenting, we want to think about some of the main pieces involved with parenting. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is love. Love includes support, encouragement, safety, empathy, honesty, transparency, acceptance, and forgiveness. Another big thing that we want to think about is shelter and food, clothing, medical care, but also educational access, financial support, advocacy, socialization, and skill building. And then the last thing that we want to think about when we talk about parenting has to do with boundaries, discipline, independence, encouraging self-care, spiritual strength, financial awareness, and relationship health. These are all things that are important in terms of making sure that we are growing happy and healthy people. Now, when we're talking about parenting, we're wondering then, what is queer parenting? What does that mean? Well, the Equality Federation talks about queer parenting as biological, adopted, foster, stepchildren, legal wards, and a child of a person who stands in loco parentis, which is referring to one who acts in the place of a parent or assumes the role of of parent to a child with the intention to parent. The action of parenting by any person who identifies as queer or any person parenting someone who identifies as queer. And the main thing that we want to think about when it comes to queer parenting is the practice of purposefully caregiving, mentoring, and protecting a person with their express intention of rejecting colonialist, oppressive gender norms. Queer parenting normalizes a full range of expressions of gender and family. Queer parenting is concerned with acceptance and love of people who need love, care, and guidance, and recognizes that centuries of state-sanctioned violence has fractured our concepts of parenting and family. So when we think about queer parenting, we want to think about the fact that parenting is something that has been done for centuries, for millennia. And the roles and the norms that we've been given over the past few years are not necessarily the roles and the norms that we have to accept. We can define and redefine what parenting means to us according to what we know is best for ourselves and for our children. Now, this is a picture of me and my spouse and my middle daughter and one of her best friends. So I'm in school, but I also have two children who are also in school. My middle daughter is a senior at the University of North Carolina at Asheville, and my son is a senior at Hillside High School. So when the pandemic hit last year, we were all here in the house, and then in the fall, we had 3 seniors all in the house together. So that presents, of course, some unique situations as far as not just parenting, but and not just queer parenting, but queer parenting from the perspective of being a student. So one of the things that I'd like for you guys to think about is that more than 1 in 5 college students, or 22% of all undergraduates, are parents, according to new analysis of data from the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Society. And this is something, the National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study. And this is something that was put forward by the Institute for Women's Policy Research in 2018. So this tells us that there are many, many students out there who are also parents and who are also queer. And our experiences are very unique. There are things that are coming up for us that may not be coming up for other folks. In particular, just the responsibility of studying and the number of hours that it takes to study and the number of hours that it takes for us to also parent, and also parent from the lens of expectations of roles, how we're able to advocate for ourselves and advocate for each other. These are all things that when we're in marginalized situations, the expectations that we have upon us may be more difficult to handle. There's an interesting statistic involving studying, which is students should spend approximately 2 to 3 hours of study time for each hour that they spend in class. And so for a course load that has 15 credits, this is of course for an undergrad, or approximately 15 hours of class time each week, that is 30 hours of study time, and 15 hours in class, which equals 45 hours in the equivalent of a full-time job. This was something that was published by collegeparentcentral.com. So when you think about that, when you think about a student, an undergraduate student in particular, that is going to class and studying for 45 hours in a week, and then parenting on top of that is going to be another, 40 or so hours a week, then we're really talking about, having some challenges here as far as time management, as far as being present for self, as far as being present for our students and our children. So these are things to think about in terms of, well, what do we do? How do we work that out? One of the things that we should think about is to expect that the current format of parenting while in school will not fit your needs, and draw on your resources to help you through this challenging time. And what does that really mean? Sometimes we have friends and we have family, but then we have friends that are family. Can we leave our kids with these folks? Can we set aside time in which we're all studying together? And that's what you see here in this photo. My now spouse and I went to Asheville to see our middle daughter and her friend. And we stayed in a resort. Well, I guess it's called a resort. It's really a retreat center that was nearby on campus. And so we scheduled a time for all of us to study. So I think in this photo, we were all studying for final exams together. I think it was either midterm or final exams. We were all studying at the same time. So coming up with creative solutions to make sure that you're, doing all of the things that you need to do is something that's critical in terms of parenting. Now, when we talk about parenting, a lot of times people want to know, well, how do I start a family? What things do I do in order to start? Well, here in this short period of time, we don't really have enough time to go through all of the options that are available to you. But just know that there are many, many, many options and many, many paths to parenthood. There's the bio route where you or someone that you know or that you care about is having a child that has some that is part of your DNA in one way or another. There is having a child with a partner. There's having a child with a friend. There is in vitro. There's open adoption. There are many, many, many children in the foster system. There are thousands of children in the foster system, as a matter of fact, who need good homes. There are step families, so you may meet someone who has children already, and then at that point, you're looking at starting a new family with that person. There's also co-parenting. So there are people who actively choose to co-parent their children with each other, even without having any sort of intimate relationship with each other. These are all different ways for you to think about starting a family. It doesn't have to be a situation where it looks like a Norman Rockwell painting, or it's something out of the 1950s or the 1940s. People every day start new families, and you can start one too. The most important thing is to have people that you trust, and to work with reliable organizations, and also to have legal support. Legal support is critical in your parenting journey. The current state and federal laws impact the parent's ability to properly support their child, and rights are a powerful tool in the face of oppressive tactics. These laws are consistently changing, and so it's important for you to know what the law is and for you to know how to use the law to help your situation and to make sure that that it's working for you and not against you. And if there are laws that are oppressive, that you are working as best as you can to get those changed. Now, entering an existing family. This is a photo of my spouse and I getting married. We knew each other for a very long time, for like 20 years or something like that. And then we got together about 10 years ago now. And we decided after the Supreme Court changed in late last year, we decided that we were going to go ahead and get married. And we did it right here in the house. So the picture that you see is us at our in our front room, in our living room, and our officiant was our very good friend, and our children were there, and nobody else was there. It was just us and our kids and the people holding the cameras. We live streamed the whole thing. It was, pandemic approved. And then we transformed the front room and had an online reception. So I tell anybody, if you're thinking about getting married at home, you should do it. I also want to make sure that I put out there that getting married is not everything. Love is a feeling. Love is an action. It's a verb. Marriage is a legal document that is a part of state institutionalized violence. So just be sure that you know the difference between what marriage really means and what love and family really means. A family can be made up of any group of people who are committed to love and care about each other. Marriage is a good way to save on taxes. So, and it's also about love, and it's also about commitment. So families change and are made every single day. The main thing to know about entering into an existing family is to go slow and form agreements. When my partner and I got together, she likes to say that she didn't have responsibility for anything, not pets, not a plant, not anything living. She had responsibility for herself and herself only. So it was quite a jump to have to learn how to navigate not just partnership, but with me, but partnership with my kids, partnership with my kids' dads. I have an ex-husband and also my oldest daughter's father and his wife and their kids. So it's a lot to navigate, and it's important to give each other grace, and it's important to form agreements. It's important to go slow, and it's important to change your agreements according to the current environment. So at one point in time, my children were going back and forth. My two youngest children were going back and forth, and then at some point they decided to stay only with us. And so that changes the dynamic as far as what happens in the household. Who's doing the chores? Who's sweeping the floor? When is homework getting done? When are parent-teacher conferences being had? So these are things that you want to think about when entering into an existing family. There are also families that may be welcoming a third or a fourth adult into their environment. And so if you are an adult that's entering into an already formed family, either as a person who is intimate with one or more of the people who are parents, that's another jump. You have to think about, what does that look like? Are you only in relationship with the parent or multiple parents, or are you also in relationship? Are you also expected to parent the children? And if you are, what are the rules? What are the expectations? What are the boundaries? What are your responsibilities? And even what are your rights? Because if you don't have any sort of legal tie to children who you are essentially parenting, so feeding, clothing, sheltering, picking up and dropping off and taking the medical appointments and so forth, what are the protections that you have as a parent when you don't have a biological or legal connection to that child or those children? So entering into an existing family is a very important thing to think about in terms of having a family. The next thing we want to talk about is allyship. An ally is someone who actively supports lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning people and works side by side with them to achieve equality. And that's a definition by Lambda Legal. 10 million people have one or more lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender parents. That is a statement by GLAAD. And one of the things that we want to think about with allyship is that everybody has a different definition of what allyship is. And so it's hard to sort of pin down, but what you really, really want to think about in terms of allyship is the intention behind a particular thing, the intention behind a move or an action or a comment or anything. Some other things to think about are calling out homophobic and transphobic comments and actions in your children, your family, and your friends, intentionally including LGBTQ people in your inner circles, regularly challenging your value systems, interrogating your intersections of privilege, rejecting the practice of relying on LGBTQ people to educate you or your children, follow the lead of LGBTQ individuals, take the lead on projects and campaigns that advocate for your children, and stop relying on law enforcement to do the work of healthcare professionals. Lastly, you want to make sure that you keep the lines of communication open. I remember talking to my children at very young ages about how they felt about themselves, and sort of decolonizing and also like interrogating my own thoughts around who they were in terms of gender, in terms of who they might choose as a partner or a loved one or something like that. And so by the time we got to an age where it was time for them to talk to me about who or what they were interested in. I'm sorry, somebody's off mute. Can you guys mute yourselves? Thank you. By the time they got to the age where they could share with me about who they liked or who they were interested in or who their friends liked or who their friends were interested in or who they felt about themselves as far as their own gender, it wasn't, it wasn't like a brand new thing, because we had been having these conversations along the way. Another thing that is good to think about with allyship is to make sure that you have books and reading materials around for your kids. Again, like I said before, talking during dinner time or at any given moment about how your kids feel. Making sure that you're watching things that are interrogating privilege and are interrogating homophobic and transphobic things, and talking about those things with your kids. Thinking yourself about these things, making art around these things, and coming up with new and better ideas for yourself. And these are just some articles and some resources about allyship. Gay Straight Alliances Save Lives, and some other resources for you to look at. This is a photo of my beautiful kids when we were in our wedding. So one of the things that, again, we want to think about is structuring your family in a way that works for you and making this clear to your children. You know what is best for you, and you know what is best for your child. And this is whether you're having a baby, or whether you're choosing family, meaning you may be in your 20s or 30s, and you're choosing to have young people in your life who are in their teens, meaning these are not your personal children, these are people who you chose to be in your life, and your role in their life is as a parent, right? You know what's best for them. And so when you're structuring your family, make sure you're making things clear to your children around your family structure. Give grace to people, but don't apologize for doing the right thing. A lot of times people will question and will try to challenge how it is that you've decided to set up your family life. Make sure that you're secure in what it is that you've decided is best for yourself. And of course, it makes sense to always be in a space of understanding different things, but don't let folks talk you out of what it is that you know is right. Gather the full weight of the law to work for you. There are a lot of people who are working really hard to change laws that are oppressive. No, changes to law can't necessarily, can never replace the fact that our country was founded on stolen land and on the backs of free labor. At the same time, we are living in the current time, and if there are laws that will help you create and maintain a loving environment for you and your children, make sure you know those laws, and make sure you know how to make sure that people implement them on your behalf. To that end, holding educators, meaning your own educators and the educators of your children, your co-parents and employers accountable is key. So understanding FMLA, understanding if you have the right for leave, parental leave, and so forth. Make sure that you also go to conferences together. Don't find yourself in the hospital, in a doctor's office or different places by yourself if you don't have to do that. Me and my spouse, we take medical appointments together. We do a lot of things together, and also teach that to your children as a practice. If you have allies that have privilege, don't be afraid to put the full weight of their privilege to work for your family. This is part of what being an ally means. If you know that you're hitting a wall and it's getting critical for you in order to advocate and do certain things for your child, and you know that someone else can help you with that, make that phone call, send that email, call in that favor, and make sure that you that these people who have that privilege, whether it's money or class or whatever, that they are helping you in your journey as a parent. And the most important thing as a parent is to ask for what you want and not just what you think you can get. This is important because as a woman, as a person of color, as a graduate of an HBCU, as a former teen mom, as a current student at an HBCU, as a queer mother, it's very difficult. People will try you. And it's important for us to think big and think about, if all of these roadblocks were not in front of me, how would I want this to go? And make sure that you ask for what it is that you really want. And just know that we've been all conditioned under white supremacy, under institutional and structural racism. We have all been conditioned to only ask for what we think we can get and not what it is that we know that we need. So make sure you do that. Very quickly, Title IX is a federal law that bans discrimination based on sex and protects students at schools. This includes discrimination, and it also includes sexual harassment. And so we want to make sure that we know and understand what Title IX is, and make sure that you are establishing legal protections for your family. People sometimes will do things because they know that they can get away with it. And it's important for you to understand and for you to know what it is that the federal laws are, and ensure that people are doing the right thing. This is another list of resources. Brown University has a really, really good newsletter that I subscribe to, and that newsletter gives you lots of information about the intersections of being a student and being queer. And then we want to make sure that you know, I'm going to share this this thing later about our name change clinic that's happening here at NCCU. I'll share the flyer with you later. But the LGBTQ Center of Durham has an awesome resources page, and our LGBTA Resource Center also has an awesome resource page. So this by no means is not a comprehensive way of looking at parenting, but hopefully these are some things that will help you along your way. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, we are going to start on our talk. We have some amazing parents that are here.
Before you start, I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
What is the difference between an open and a closed adoption?
An open adoption is where the parents know each other, and in some cases, the parent the birth parent is able to know and be in contact with the birth child. And a closed adoption is where that relationship is not there. So the child only knows its adoptive parents as its parents, and the birth parent is not involved in any way.
And
That's my understanding.
okay. Okay, one more question. And this is a very broad question.
Sure.
We have all heard of talk of, we see it in media, we know it's true. We all have heard talk of financial assistance from the government when it comes to foster care. May I ask why the government assists with foster care? Not that it's a bad thing, but I'm just curious to why.
I actually don't know a lot about funding for foster parents. I don't have a lot of experience with that. My thought process is that foster children are in the care of the state, and that any resources, meaning money, that goes to the people who are taking care of them is about ensuring that the people who are caring for them have the resources that they need to care for those children. But that's not a legal definition on my part.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
I actually had a question too, that kind of piggybacked off of what Lafayette was saying, but I'm not sure. Like fostering is something that I don't understand a lot about. Do you have a lot of knowledge around it? Can you just talk about like how does that process work or anything like that? If not, then that's fine. It might be worth doing another program on something like that. But I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of concrete information about fostering. I grew up with chosen family that always fostered children. Um, and they were really like very close chosen family. They always had foster children. And I have a cousin that has foster children. But I don't know of what the actual process is. I do know of a court case, a current court case that is moving up through to the Supreme Court, where I think it's the city of Philadelphia contracts with multiple organizations to vet foster parents. And the Catholic Church is one of those organizations, in the Catholic Church in Philadelphia, and I think it's Philadelphia. Please forgive me if I'm wrong, but the Catholic Church in that city does not allow same-sex foster parents. And so there is a current case that should be moving up to the Supreme Court that challenges that right. So we should see something coming down around that relatively soon.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Okay, so let's see. I guess I'm not sharing my screen anymore, right? Okay, good. So we are now going to have our chat. We have 4 parents, including me, Lou, Charisse, and Chelsea. And I'll start with introducing Lou. Lou Gent is a 42-year-old mixed Indigenous accessibility self-advocate, writer, and health sciences student who lives in Durham, North Carolina with their fiance, kiddo, an old dog, and a kitten. They work in stones and energy and geek out over epidemiology studies. Hi, Lou.
Sorry, I was receiving coffee at the same time. I was like trying to unmute. Hello, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to this talk.
No problem. Next, we have Charisse Lovett, whose pronouns are she, her. Charisse is 39 years old, a mother of 3 kids, 1 girl and 2 boys, and grandmother of 2.5 grandkids. Number 3 is due in April. She received her undergraduate degree from NCCU with a BS in criminal justice in 2006 and is currently working on her master's in Parks and Recreation Management from UNCG. And she has been in her current relationship for 5.5 years. Hi, Charisse.
Hello, Afiya. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And our last parent is Chelsea Earls. Chelsea got a BA in Women's and Gender Studies and has a 13-year-old in Durham Public Schools. And Chelsea is also one of my oldest friends in the world. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. It's awesome to be with you all.
Sure. Thank you for coming. So the first question that I have for you guys is, how did you become a parent? Let's kick it off with Charisse.
Okie dokie. I became a parent my senior year in high school. So I was a teen mom in 1999. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was playing basketball, had a chance to play basketball at North Carolina Central. And I was actually at basketball camp when I found out I was pregnant. So it was really crazy. And I always told myself, I said, okay, I'm a statistic now as a teen mom, but I'm not gonna, that was gonna be the only statistic at the time because I was gonna make sure I graduated high school. So I couldn't be a high school dropout. So I made sure of that. And then had 2 more after her.
So Charisse, when I met you, you had the 2, and your eldest was, I think, in like 5th grade or something like that.
Okay.
But one of the things that we share is the teen parenthood piece, right? So can you share a little bit about what that's like?
It was hard. So my mom, she wasn't very supportive, and I found out a lot why after I grew up and got older. So my mom too got pregnant in high school, her senior year, but she was able to hide her pregnancy. She graduated high school, went on her senior trip to Europe, came back. Her parents secretly moved her to the state of Washington. She had her daughter and left her to family members. So she was raised by cousins, and my mom went on to college. So I don't know if it was shame for my mom, but after I had my daughter and graduated, she literally was like, 18-year-olds can't stay in my house. You're an adult. And I'm like, I have nowhere to go. So I actually ended up in Durham through the Durham Rescue Mission, which a lot of people don't know. So it was a challenge, trying to work and go to school, attempt to go to school, because it took me several years to finish my undergrad, because you had to stop and go back, and just making sure that we were good. I know it was plenty of nights where she ate and I didn't, because you have a little responsibility to make sure the child is fed. So it was a struggle. It was it definitely was a struggle, but we made it through.
Thank you for sharing. Chelsea, why don't you tell us how you became a parent? I was actually there when it happened.
She was there the moment it happened. I am an old parent. I always wanted to be a parent since preschool. I remember in preschool thinking that I wanted to be a parent, but and I wanted to in college too, but I waited, and also it kind of didn't come up because I didn't have a partner. So I was 35, but I decided that maybe it was in college that I decided that if I didn't have a partner, I still wanted to be a parent. So I chose to, through a donor, I got pregnant and had my daughter almost 14 years ago with the help of, Afiya said not to do anything, without support and friends and family. And Afiya was part of my big family of people who welcomed my daughter Jess when she was born. Yeah. And also one thing, a really kind of nerdy thing I did when I was thinking about wanting to have a baby and whether I could do it was on my own, was I had this idea that I would ask like 30 people if they would help me in some way, like one day of the month or something, which, it never works out that like neatly like you think it might or whatever. But just talking to my friends in my community is what helped me think that I could do it. And friends like Afiya have definitely made it possible for us to exist as a family.
Chelsea, I remember when you got a tattoo that was about babies. Can you share about that?
Our other mutual friend, Danette, and I got tattoos at the same time, and mine is like a starburst, and it's about potential, basically, new life and potential. Yeah.
Can you share, would you like to share with folks like how you decided to get pregnant? Are you okay with that?
I don't know if I know what you mean.
Like, okay, because we were in the park when you were getting yourself pregnant. Do you remember?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Say more.
How, okay, so you decided to get pregnant. You didn't go to a sperm bank.
Yeah, I just did it at home, DIY. Yeah.
Right, but are you okay with talking about the fact that you chose that person?
Yeah, he's a known donor, like not a sperm bank donor, a friend who is part of our family, but I wouldn't say like more part of our family than Afiya is, like he's not like a dad, more like an uncle, like, a very dear family friend. And yeah, I asked him to be my daughter's donor. And
right. So you know where he is. We all know where he is, but he's not the person that's being called for any sort of, support or to make any sort of decision or anything like that. And I remember that being very intentional on both on your part as well as his part, in order to help you in your journey.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
The last piece that I wanted to ask you about, Chelsea, was about your intention around gender when you had your baby.
Yeah, not sure when I became, I don't know, at some point I just realized that when we choose the gender that our children, what their pronouns will be and what we call them in terms of gender, I realized that we're guessing, which, works out differently for different families. But I had enough friends whose parents had guessed wrong and had gone through some hell because of that. And so I tried to raise my daughter without a binary gender until she was able to choose it, which I basically did, but we don't live in a bubble. I mean, in some ways, we all do have, the communities that we have and whatever, but and Durham is a different place than a lot of places are, but still she was impacted by, our binary gender culture. And when she went to kindergarten, so like I wouldn't always correct people too. So extended family members and doctors and people would call her a girl, and because she's a cis girl, but she started calling herself a girl because of that. I think she also started calling me mom because of that. I didn't teach her to call me that, but and then in kindergarten, when she went there, I told her teacher, because she didn't have any preference about pronouns, I told her teacher that any pronoun is fine and nobody needs to be corrected, whatever pronoun they call her. And within 1 week of going to kindergarten, even with this really wonderful, supportive teacher, she told me that she wanted to go by she only. So it just kind of shows, how strong the culture is. But I do think that it benefited me and her. And Afiya came up with the term niece few when I was pregnant. And I really love that. And I think it helped me to see her as a full human being with all different kinds of potential, to not call her a girl the whole time, I think. And maybe that's because of my limited thinking, because of course a girl should have every potential that a boy has, but it was helpful for me to kind of, like you talked about, Afiya, interrogating your thinking about these things. And I think that process helped me think about her in a more broad way.
Yeah, and it was the first time that I had even heard about raising a child from a gender neutral perspective. But because I was so dedicated to our friendship and our, chosen family ship, it was something that I was open to learning how to do. And I really tried like super hard to make sure that we were doing it.
Yeah, our community, our friends and family were amazing, and that made it possible for us too.
Lou, can you tell us how you became a parent?
Yes, I was going to say that I keep getting like spam calls, and I have tried to like lock out. Can you all still hear me?
Mm-hmm. We can hear you.
Okay, great. I do want to say that when I met Chelsea, Jess was a lot younger and was still I don't think they had gone to she had gone to kindergarten yet, and so Jess was just Jess, and I don't think that there were any pronouns associated with raising Jess. And so the community around like what we were, I think we were in a poetry class at the time together with someone that we knew, and just reiterating Jess's name as Jess's pronoun, I felt was like really powerful. My child at the time was like 6 months old, and just to see a child just constantly reaffirmed in that way with their name over and over was really powerful for me. And so Chelsea, I know that like, it sounds like you have some potential regrets about how that went, but like for me it was a really powerful time to see you raising Jess that way. So I'm grateful to you for being in community with us that way.
That's so awesome. Thank you.
Thank
I never knew
you.
that.
Yeah. So I have a 12-year-old binary kiddo who is, non-binary kiddo who like initially I got pregnant with them by taking some pills to try and start ovulating, because I was, at the time I was pretty, like initially I had been pretty like on a track of like not wanting to have children. I had grown up kind of raising my own siblings in a pretty very dysfunctional household. My father was an alcoholic, which I didn't realize till I was like 35 years old. And I'm now like starting Al-Anon over it. And but like something's shifted in my ex-husband and my relationship, and he's a cis man, and we decided to try. And I'm really glad that we did, because our kid is just the light of our universe. And my fiance rounds out our current family. And we would do anything for Penn. And I think that there are other ways that I have parented throughout my life. I've become a parent to lots of collegiate aged children, young people over the past few years. I often don't feel old enough for that role, because I feel like I'm still a kid myself. I don't feel like I've got it all figured out. I'm still a college student myself, but my fiance and I are the community support and co-coaches for a yearly competition called CUPSI, with the collegiate level slam poetry finalist at UNC. And these kids, as I sometimes call them, get to go to an international stage to it's typically here in the US, but like there's international competition, and they get to do their work on that stage. And that work that we do with them not only brings forth their identity in these pieces and these poems, but it also, like, I was looking at that like definition of parenting that you put up initially. We've had to work with them to help them like figure out how to like clothe themselves and have shelter while they're there. And like, these are all things that we've worked with them over the years to like set up structures for within their student organization as well. So they call me poetry mom. And so it like, initially I was like a little like, I'm not old enough for that, but now I've like settled into that role with them. And it's definitely because a lot of the kids that we've worked with in this capacity have also had queer identities, and some of them have never told their family of origin, and use this avenue to come out. It's a really powerful experience, and it's an experience and an honor that I really not only deeply value, but that I don't take lightly. I consider it a calling, and I really miss it right now because of the pandemic. We're not doing it this year. And last year's session was cut, in half. And so, but that's another way that I think people can parent children is through volunteerism. And so I really wanted to just throw that out there, is that if you feel in your life like you aren't ready to really like house someone, there are ways to become a community type figure, a community parent in a way, of that parenting in loco that really can be powerful both to you and to the individuals that you are helping along their path. So
Thank you, Lou. So when you find yourself in that, well, first of all, I agree that Penn is like one of the most wonderful kids.
thank you.
And I remember when they were a baby and we used to live around the corner from each other, and you actually lived right across the street from the communications building at Central, and I could like walk around the corner
Mm-hmm.
to see you. And I am wondering about this piece around when you have a child that's biologically connected to you, but then you also have children in your life who are coming into your life because they're being rejected by their family of origin. You already have, you know, like boundaries and responsibilities and rules and so forth that you're setting up for your bio kid, right? Do
Right.
you do the same thing for you know, kids that are coming into your life who, you know, who still need parents, they still need guidance, they still need love, they still need, you know, acceptance and understanding? Do they also need rules and, you know, and
I mean, the short answer is yes. And it took me a long time to figure out like how to do that. I am not great at it because I came from like such a trauma-filled background. Like I didn't know how to do that. I grew up like, I'm gonna, you know, I grew up wanting kids from a young age and like thinking like, as I'm just gonna have have babies, and then like I'll have a magical family and I won't be excuse my language, screwed up like everyone else, you know, like in my family, like I was gonna have a magical family, not like that family that I came from. Not my siblings. My siblings are angels, they're my babies. But I then when I got to adulthood, I was like, oh, that's not how it works, so I don't want kids. And then I had a kid and I was like, oh, like I don't know how to do this. Like even though I had been like I had worked as a nanny for 15 years and then added on to that 8 years of like and some of it was co-concurrent of working in home and community supports for folks who have autism or IDD, because my family is strongly neurodivergent. Like I have ADHD, my kiddo has autism, my brother has autism and ADHD, and my sister has ADHD. So it's just that like that's my life. And so not only do I didn't know how to make boundaries as much, like I didn't know how to navigate a lot of things socially. So I remember like one of the first people who like stayed with my ex-husband and I, who was in like a transitioning housing like mode, who was like, I was kind of parenting in loco, came to me through like a social activism space. And I had no boundaries with this person. And they were in a really trauma filled space. And I would just like, my baby was like 5 months old at the time, and I would like just strap the baby to the back and just like go with this person wherever they needed to go. I was just trying to be so supportive, but like it got really toxic that they were just kind of dragging me everywhere, just like through the city. And like I remember consulting with an elder in the community, and she was just like, you don't have to get on her train. And those words have really, really helped me over the years. And I remember being just like angry at them though at the time, because I was like, what do you mean I don't have to get on her train? I'm on her train. But I don't have to get on her train. And that's like something that's hard for a child of an alcoholic to learn. But, you know, you have to learn as you take these folks into your home. If you're thinking about fostering, if you're thinking about doing parenting in loco, like a dream that I have is having a big, huge house here in Durham and having like a house like is on Pose. Of course I want that. But am I ready for like all the drama that would come with that? No, I don't want that. So I need like some years before I can think about doing that, right? So my kid is like out the house and I can deal with the fact that like I would only be dealing with adults. So yeah, you have to be ready to not be on people's trains. That's that's the best advice I can give is something I got from somebody else.
Right. I really liked how you touched on this piece of being neurodivergent, and I really want, if possible, if Charisse and Chelsea could felt like they could touch on these things as well. So I have not been diagnosed with ADHD, but my son has, and he's also has undiagnosed dyslexia, right? He has had an IEP for a very long time, and I've had to go to SAT meetings since he was in middle school. And being in a position where I'm a student myself, as well as navigating his educational experiences, as well as navigating my own ADHD stuff and his ADHD stuff. And, you know, so like there are times when all the things start coming together. And what I really liked about you, Lou, is one time, the last time I saw you, I was talking to you a little bit about this, and you broke down for me like how some folks are sugar reactive and some folks are, you know, reactive to I think it was dyes and colorings and things like that, which my son is, but that how all of these things will work to create, you know, some challenges, and that there are all of these ways in which you can, you know, figure out how to do better. So for all three of you, can you give like a really short sort of story or explanation as far as how, when multiple things converge for you as far as education and being queer and so forth is concerned, like what is it that you do? How do you meet those challenges?
I can start.
Sure.
I think for me, like I know my mom is a great listening ear. We don't always agree on things, but I know I can burn a hole in her ear. She's a retired educator, so I'll go to her, but her delivery is not always what I want, so I'll shut down, but I still go to her. Like, it's really weird. So like I want the advice, but I think it's the communication that breaks down. My girlfriend is another. I know as far as we've gone through a lot of parenting issues and challenges in the last 5.5 years, adding on the schooling, adding on the business, working full time. So it's times where she has to hear it. And I know she's ready for at least the school part to be over, because just one less thing off my plate. One more thing off my plate that I don't have to deal with. But she's also very supportive She's actually the one with the youngest with his school. And I tell people, I said, I feel like a bad mom sometimes because she has all the school logins. And I'm like, so what did he do today? Like, what has the teacher said? Because to me, I'm involved, but that's not one thing that I have to necessarily be so on top of as far as like my responsibility. It's like, can you at least handle that? And just, keep me informed and let me know what's going on. She stays on top of me. Like the youngest one is in counseling and she's like, have you reached out to the counselor? When's the next appointment? So it's those things that help with dealing with all of those different aspects. Like my oldest son, he's my middle child. He was diagnosed with ADHD in elementary school, going through different like intense in-home therapy. The youngest one hasn't been diagnosed with anything, but his is more like a OCD type thing. When things aren't in particular ways, he gets very angry. So it's just dealing with those behaviors and trying to just keep him engaged and involved in different things. So he's not really your traditional sports boy. So, he tried football. I'm always the type of person, you start it, you finish it, but you don't have to do it again. And so now he's into the acting and modeling. So that's what he's doing now, where he's able to take on these different characters and have an outlet that way.
That was one of the things that I talked about earlier, was about how it's important to have more than one person that's on these things, to make sure that you build up your team. Like it can be your partner, but it can also be your actual family and your chosen family.
For me, the advocating at school has been one of the very hardest things that I've ever done as a parent. And it's one thing that can be especially hard when you're a single parent too. I've always appreciated the times when I've had someone there with me. Lou's been there with me in an IEP meeting. And when I had a partner for 4 years, we would go to them together. But I think that's one of the very hardest things, is dealing with those institutions, especially when you're trying to get the educational needs of your kid met, and the schools are set up for, they're not set up for autistic kids. They're set up for neurotypical kids, or not set up for kids who have ADHD or bipolar. So you got to figure out how to try to get them to at least change the paradigm they're using when they're teaching your kid or giving services. And I haven't been extremely successful in that. But I think it's partly because our schools are completely underfunded. So you're kind of trying to milk blood from a stone, at this point. Hopefully that will change soon. But I guess just talking to teachers helps a lot. Like recently, in addition to the official meeting that I had with teachers, I sent them a message about my goals for Jess and her needs, and also the impact it has on her to do what she needs to do at school. And good things came out of that. So I think sometimes when the institution, you're hitting up against the institution, and also a lack of resources, sometimes you'll reach caring ears, like a teacher who can be creative and, come up with a solution that's different than, like, it's not the government guaranteeing that they will meet your child's needs like they should legally, but it is someone coming up with a resource that's really helpful because they want to, because they have those skills or they have that resource or whatever. So that's one way that things have worked out better for us. And for me right now, it feels like not hitting my head up against that wall and trying to be more collaborative and creative has been better than fighting for what we really legally deserve, but it's just not happening right now for us at the schools. So, yeah.
For so I think it like a similar, I'm pulling like similar energy like from the two folks who've already talked. Like I definitely take a step back when I'm overwhelmed. And I definitely tell the folks around me that I need them to pick up certain parts of things. One of like, and, or if I think that something's just like too big for me or can't fit on my plate. Like one of the things that I mentioned in my email to you was that like, I'm already trying to get this thing off the ground at my kid's school, this EC parenting committee for the PTA, because at their school they just didn't have anything like that, and there's a lot of like ableist behavior on the part of a lot of the kids there, and they just need like a whole restructuring so that there's can be like an anti-bullying kind of campaign that focuses on anti-ableism. And so I've been working really closely with the administration on trying to get that to happen. And my kid at the same time is like, yeah, that's great, but I'm struggling because I feel like I'm the only trans kid here. And so I knew that they weren't the only trans kid at their elementary school. And it's really, really common for kids to come out when they're trans. And so I just went to my co-parent and my ex-husband, and I was like, look, I need you to help get this Rainbow Club that has been being kicked around on this message board that I like had started a thread about with this other parent. Like, I need you to help get it off the ground because I literally can't do it right now. Like I'm in school, and so he did it. And so I think, and now it's like this really great resource for my kid and one of their best friends who's also non-binary, who's this parent that I was working with kid. And so I feel like just, it's hard to name that you need help. It's really hard when you come from marginalized communities because I think we're just taught that we shouldn't, and that we should shoulder everything. But it's not a model that we're used to, but it's the only way to survive sometimes.
Thank you for that, Lou. My heart goes out to Penn because it's really difficult to feel isolated and to feel like your experience is so singular, and that especially at the age when all you want to do is to connect with other people and to sort of like blend in, to have an experience that you feel like is singular can be very difficult. I also really love this piece that you said where you picked up the phone and said, I need you to take care of this. I'm in school. I have these other things that I have to do. I can't do it by myself, and I can't do this particular thing myself. I do think that we are conditioned to think that we have to take care of everything, and that it takes a little bit of extra work to tell ourselves that it's okay if we can't do it because we have to write a paper, or because we have to, submit something, or because we have to study, we have to do some research, we have to take a test. and that somebody else has to pick this up, and that it's not just an extra thing, but it's actually their responsibility to do this for us in order to make sure that we are raising whole and happy kids. I don't know about y'all, but well, I do know about y'all, but y'all know that I was married to a man for 10 years, right? And then within a year or so after that ended, I came out, and it was just like too much too soon for everybody. And it was hard. It was hard for me. It was hard for everybody else, because I was sort of breaking out of one identity and getting into a different one. Can each of you very quickly, because we're over time, but like super quickly, talk about what that's like to do within the context of parenting, like breaking out of one an identity that people have gotten used to and getting into something else, while you are also parenting, because you're dealing with identity politics, if you will, as it relates to other people's perception of you. And that can sometimes create a situation where people might think that your parenting is maybe not that great because of, because of the shifting in your identity. So can each of you sort of touch on that just, super quickly, about breaking out of, coming into yourself, and in that process, how that may have impacted other people's relationship with you and your parenting?
I think for me, when I talked to my mom about it, my mom's she's so sweet and so cool, and she's just like,
Yes.
okay, that's what if that's what it is, basically, then I'm here to support you. My biggest concern, of course, were the kids. My daughter being already out of the house, it was just a conversation with her, but still having the boys in the house, it definitely was different. My youngest son, he because he was so young, he's just like, oh, okay. But what I found interesting was he's like, I'm okay with 2 girls, but I don't think I would like 2 boys, which I thought that was very interesting when having that conversation. And, it was, people can love who they want to love, and that's just society. So now, just because he's in that awkward age, he's just like, it's all gross, but he still loves us both. I feel like he loves her more than he loves me at times, but it was just about communication and just having, those talks. And when you're out in public, I don't want to say where you're not singling people out, but letting them be aware that, look, there's other people like mommy, and, and so you're not in a family with 2 moms now, and you're by yourself. So I think that was one big thing.
I think for me, trying to raise a baby without a binary gender was the most challenging, because I was out before I became a parent, but it was really hard for a lot of people to wrap their minds around and be supportive, and not use the wrong pronoun or whatever. That was more challenging for me. But I guess if you have that relationship, you can keep having the conversations, or kind of working on it over time, or just as they get to know your kid or you maybe your new partner or whatever, people start to realize it's just people, it's just life, you know, it's just whatever. It's not such a big deal. It's not so scary and challenging. Although I think the further you go out, like, you know, if you're the center of the circle and then there's like, you know, your closest people and then they have to talk to the, like my parents talking to the extended family, you know, when the baby was born without using a pronoun, like they couldn't really handle that. And so I guess it's just something you just have to work on within the relationships where you can work on it. And then sometimes you don't have that relationship. What's really sad to me is that sometimes it hurts the relationship, the fact that you can't. But of course, we know as queer people, sometimes you just lose people that way, which is really heartbreaking. But yeah.
I feel like I lost my dad for quite some time, but and then because of that, I lost a couple of sisters, not the sisters that y'all know, but sisters from my dad. And then a few years ago, I decided that I was going to have all of these conversations. And what I didn't know was that my sisters were just waiting on me. You know, I had no idea. I didn't know. And not only were they waiting on me, but they had been, you know, praying for me and all of these different things. Like they had really been holding me in their heart, is what I should say. And I also didn't know until maybe 2 weeks ago, so right before the wedding, so 3 weeks ago, that yes, that's why communication is so important. My stepmother had been talking to my father for years about treating me in a better way, you know, like using better language with me, being more tolerant, being more accepting. Again, these are things that I did not know. I was so afraid for my life, literally in terms of coming out, you know, to my dad, that all of these relationships got cut off in that process. So I have been slowly walking that back over the past couple of years, and it feels really good. There was another piece, but as you know, Chelsea, that has to do with that has to. You'll have to go into settings. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You'll have to go. There was another piece about losing friends, and when I got together with my partner, I lost a couple of friends, but I just kept working, and there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of bitterness that was there, but I kept working, and eventually we got back. So, Lou.
Sorry for putting my hand up. There was either reverb or someone didn't have their mute on, and the conversation was going over your speech, so I wanted to be able to hear what you were saying. I hear you on so many points, Afiya. Like, I really had a similar experience with my dad and my stepmother. I accidentally came out as so my sort of short story is that I came out as non-binary after my kid did, because I was like, for years that, you know, I knew I've known my whole life, right, that I'm gender fluid and that I didn't feel right. And like I kept like escalating and like high femme presentation until I was about 40, and like the dysphoria was so high, and I was just like, I just got to get it right. If I get it right and become like the best girl possible, then I won't feel this way anymore. But it kept being that way, and then eventually I was like, okay, this isn't real. Like that's not what's going to fix it. And so but I had always been honest with my kid and been like, you know, I'm gender fluid, like I have these feelings about gender. And we had always been honest with them about the way gender works. And by the way, a really good book to read to your kids that decolonizes gender is The Gender Wheel. So if you have any younger children, I'd say like 12 and under, it's a really good book for that. And it talks about how gender just isn't binary, and like life isn't binary, and like the idea of binaries is a colonial ideal, and that like the idea of wheels and of spirals is found in nature and science and pre-colonial ideals. So but when my kid came out, initially they were probably around 5, and they were just, I thought maybe they're just like, you know, copying my gender, because they were saying things like, you know, I don't feel like I'm a boy. I don't feel like I'm a girl. I don't feel like I'm a boy. And I was like, oh, well, that's things I've said to them. So, I was just like, this is just maybe a mirroring thing. And then they became really insistent about it when they were around 7. And they were like also getting really depressed. And so I saw this as like a really intense like time for them, where they were like really establishing their gender identity. And so I went directly to some Facebook groups that are like parents of transgender non-conforming kids. And I started like, going to the, like, this is before COVID, in the in-person meetings. And it gave them coming out, gave me the strength to come out and be who I was. And then it just kind of cascaded from there. Like, of course, coming out is a process. And like when I was like 40, I started cutting my hair. Like the next year I accidentally came out as trans on Facebook. Like I was trying to like reply to like something in a group, and I shared it to my page. It was like a question. It was like, how does it feel to be non-binary? And I was like trying to reply to it, and I just shared it. To my main page. And like hours later I found it, and I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? What did I do? And I was just like, I can't believe I did that. And I was like, okay, cat's out of the bag now. Like, I am non-binary. I guess everyone knows. And might as well tell people I'm pansexual too while we're at it. Like, let's just get it all, put them all the rocks on the table. And it was really liberating, obviously, because like I had held that in a lot, like in really close to my chest for a really long time. And then after that, I like my mom, I told my mom that day, because I knew like she stalks my Facebook. She's just like, what is it? What is going on? Because I don't call her frequently enough. And then my dad, and my stepmom just didn't say anything. And then, but like, then I started posting more and more things about it, posted about Penn being trans, non-binary, and like, their struggles at school and things like that. I was just like being a regular parent. And then I totally, sorry, I got distracted by seeing this thing at the screen. Then my stepmom started mailing Penn gifts during the pandemic. So last year, like, I think it was like for their birthday last year, they mailed them like all these rainbow clothes. And I was like, what is it? Is this a message of acceptance? And I was just like, because I was just like really, really frightened to tell my evangelical minister dad, who'd been physically abusive to me my entire life and had like basically cut off my brother for being gay. I didn't want to tell him. And so I felt like my stepmom was like, hey, we already know. And we accept and love Penn and you. And so I was like, maybe it's not that though. So I didn't say anything because they weren't saying anything. And then one day I just kept using Penn's proper pronouns. And one day in text, my dad like confronted me about the pronouns. And I was like, listen, I thought y'all already knew. And he was like, nope. And then they started using the proper pronouns, and they were like, they leaned into being more supportive with the gifts that started coming. And it was just incredible how much love they've expanded their hearts to give my child and to me. And I didn't ever think they had it in them. And I think that that is that we rob people of the opportunity to grow and to change by not communicating. And I'll admit that like I am the first one to do that. But it's also about like how they've communicated in the past with you. So you have to know that it's not always your fault. Like you shouldn't blame yourself necessarily for that, which is also something I do really badly. Sorry, I'm talking so much, but a lot.
Okay. I have a quick note. I want to make sure that everybody fills out the evaluation. It's in the chat. A link to the evaluation is in the chat. And then someone had a question for Chelsea. I'm probably going to mispronounce the name, but Raphael, is that right?
Yes. Lafayette, you're fine.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Miss Chelsea, if you choose to answer this question, I really appreciate it. So you say you had a child with a donor. May I ask, does your daughter ever ask about the donor, or how's that relationship?
It's a really sweet relationship. She knows him and has always known him as her donor. And he doesn't live around here anymore, but he's also a friend of Afiya too. She's known him. We hung out the night that I asked him, actually. I don't know if you remember that, Afiya, but it's a sweet thing. And we've always talked about how she doesn't have a dad. She has a donor, and he gave me something that helped me have a baby. And yeah, it's a cool thing.
Okay, awesome. I just a little curious of how that relationship dynamic worked.
Yeah, I guess it's a lot of kids are really very interested in it. And I know I've been hearing more about donor conceived children. There are groups, that they have as they get older, and more people are, have that experience. And there are a lot of different relationships that people have and terms that they use. We say donor. Some people say biological father. That term doesn't make sense to me, but I might need to grow around that. I'm not sure. Like, to me, a father is a parent, but yeah, it's a good relationship. And also, I guess this reminds me too of like how we need to learn from people who have that experience that our kids are having. If you haven't had that, like, I don't know the experience of being autistic. So I try to learn from autistic people, autistic adults, about, what I need to do as her parent, or what her experience might be and stuff. And that's also true of donor conceived kids. So that's just only our experience. And that's just so far. She's 13, but yeah, thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Well, we are. Oh, Tamara, you have a question?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So my question is kind of piggybacking off of Raphael's question to Chelsea. So with your daughter having a donor, and I'm studying social work, and I can imagine it's hard for you as a parent, parenting from a queer perspective, and we're taught like, families need a father and a mother, and if they don't, that affects their family environment. And you know, and looking at any negative impacts on a child down the road. So what is it like navigating that and helping your daughter feel encouraged in spite of all of that information that's just out there? And you know, support services, parenting, trying to support other families with that type of practice. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I'm not sure if I totally understand. I'm sorry. What
So
you're asking.
like yeah, what's it like navigating, like you said, kids are interested that she has a donor in place of a father, and you're not comfortable with biological father and so forth, but most of our society is kind of like, and even in like helping profession, I'm sorry, my child is talking. Okay. And okay, okay, hold on. Talking Tom, sorry. Okay, there you go. So like, how have you been able to navigate, or have you had to navigate fighting back against that kind of cultural norm about, oh, every child needs a father and a mother?
Mostly I don't bump up against it, which, you know, kind of says something about my community, or like, I don't know, what I'm dealing with and who I'm not dealing with as much or something. Or maybe a lot of people, maybe people have thoughts and they don't say them. Jess, do you feel like a lot of people feel like it's weird that you don't have a dad? I don't know. I guess we have enough community with enough different family types that we don't hit up against it too much. There was a former schoolmate on Facebook who kept talking about, I think, fatherless families or something like that as a social problem. And I tried to talk
That's
to
what
her
I'm
about
talking about.
Yeah, I tried to be like, that's not a social problem. Like, you know, you're just describing one, you know, feature of many families. It doesn't mean that it's not a problem in and of itself. You know, there may be problems where maybe our jobs don't pay enough for a single parent to support a family, or we don't have universal health care in our country, or, you know, we don't have affordable housing, or whatever it is. But mostly I don't hit up against, I mean, it is difficult to be a single parent for those reasons and others. But thank goodness I have my, you know, my family and community like Afiya and our dear friends. But mostly, I think we don't hit up against it. And it's, I guess I say that's not the problem. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm just, you know, becoming a social worker, I want to be sensitive to everybody's family lifestyle. So um I would just die if I put that narrative onto a family like that, because I'm having to learn that in school, you know what I mean? As far as human development and so forth. So
I
I
think
just
it's kind of disturbing that they're teaching you that, because hearing it, it sounds very like a misogynistic, homophobic rhetoric from my perspective. It doesn't sound like it gives any space for single motherhood, for intentional single motherhood, for queer families, for families that have parents of different genders outside of mother and father, or just mom, you know, female male. Like it's a lot. Like that rhetoric sounds like a lot. So
we
it's
just
kind of
need more,
disturbing.
we just need more because I think we don't come in contact with it as much, I guess, in the practice, so they don't teach on it much. But yeah, like being here is very helpful in like a generalist practice sense for social work, because you never know what family dynamic you're going to run into, and if you haven't experienced it, you're going to be super nervous, and especially if you're like me, a new social worker, like, oh, I don't want to offend nobody, I don't want to hurt anyone. And so I feel like we just need more education or models or evidence-based practices, or at least pointed in the right direction? That might be a good question for my field professor, you know, about like, hey, where can we hear about this? Where can we educate ourselves more? So if we run into families this way, we are holding up to our ethic and respecting their dynamic.
So I would like to interject in there just from a practitioner standpoint. It is your job to learn outside of the classroom, because your professors are only going to give you what they've experienced. They're also going to give you their bias. And to have that baked into your program, or have that baked into the book, or, you know, whatever it's coming from, that is a bias. You have to be aware of it. And the idea that there has to be a 2-parent household is a lie, because a lot of people come from 1-parent households, or from multi-parent households where there are people of, you know, various gender identities and sexual orientations. And so it is. So when we talk about decolonizing learning, that's that kind of work. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add to that a little bit.
I'm down with it.
I asked all 3 of my kids before this session what it was that they, well, I asked them if they thought that there was a benefit to them being raised by 2 women in my, you know, on my side of the house. And all 3 of them said yes, but my son is the one who was emphatic about yes. Like, it was immediate. It was, of course. Okay. And he's 18. And so, you know, that's obviously not a case study. It's not, you know, some sort of stratified, you know, double blind type situation where, you know, it's peer reviewed and so forth. And so we know that, you know, we can base a lot of statistical research and so forth on that. But you know, one of the things that he said was that he didn't feel like he missed some sort of, you know, male energy that he needed in order to feel safe and um, and and comfortable in who he is. That he needed to have that in my home in order for him to feel like a safe and responsible, you know, human being. And not that grades are any sort of marker about whether or not someone is smart or whether or not someone is successful. They're not. However, since he's been staying with us, you know, like since he's been only with us and not going back and forth, he's been making the A honor roll, and he's made straight A's, as a matter of fact, ever since last, like the latter part of last year. So, I mean, 4.0, 4.0, 4.0. And so, and we've had a lot of really, you know, connective conversations about who he is. So I really long for the day when they really start including, when they start expanding the definition of what parenthood looks like, when they start expanding the definition of what family looks like to include what families are actually already doing and have actually been doing for a long time. And we wouldn't even be in this space where we had to figure it out so much if it not were for the hundreds of years of state-sanctioned violence against us, to the point where now we have to, you know, figure it all out. So, you know, I wish you the best in your journey as a student. I think that just by being open to and seeing that things are not how they're being written in the textbook is a really, really, really good start.
I wanted to mention something. I'm actually also like a licensed clinician in my life, but I'm the diversity director of diversity and inclusion at North Carolina Central. And I have to say, social workers and counselors have to do a lot of self-education. We're not going to be taught everything that we need to know, especially about communities of color and especially about queer communities of color. Like, it's so important to do the research and get the experience, because professors are human and they can't know everything. They're flawed, and our systems are flawed, right? Because our systems are built in white supremacy and heterocentrism. So we can't just depend on our professors to teach us everything. We need to get out there and really research things so that we are prepared when we go into the world for actual humans and not just, white clients.
Yeah, and definitely like my field professor suggested this talk tonight. So I definitely have a bunch of, he was like, get 3 hours tonight, hours, this is going on. So I'm glad I was able to make it out. So this has been really great and very informative for my practice too, in my life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know Caitlin had a question.
Yes, I do have a question. This might be completely off topic and it might not be the time to speak about this, but I forget who it was. Someone was discussing IEP meetings. Who was that?
It was me, but also probably Chelsea. I know I'm not the only person
Okay.
to make them.
So I was wondering if any of you have any interactions with a one-on-one aid for your child with autism. I know someone said they have a child with autism.
I have never had that, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe my question's not relevant then.
Yeah, no,
I served as a one-on-one aide in home and community support and in job support for about 8 years with various participants in Chapel Hill, Durham, and Raleigh. And I was with one particular family for 8.5 or 8 years or so. That entire time, and added in and subtracted out other participants. So you can ask your question and see if I can.
Yeah. So it's a layered question. Can I email you or message you something after this? Can you type your email into the chat?
Yes, of course. I'll type it into the chat.
My son did not have a one-on-one. He did have pull-out though, so that someone would work with him. Okay.
What was that like? Was it at school he would have someone with him?
Yeah, at school he had someone that pulled him out from, I think it started in 7th grade, and he had that all the way until, I think it was like the end of his sophomore year. It might have even been the beginning of his junior year in high school.
Okay. Well, Lou, thank you for sharing your information with me. And I will reach out to you after this. Sorry if that was off topic, everyone.
You're so welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending and for coming. I hope this was informative. I hope that if you are a person thinking about becoming a parent, that you've got some good information there to help you on your journey. If you are a person who already is a parent and you are a student or a parent of a student. I hope that you heard something that was familiar to you and that was helpful to you in your journey. Please remember to be safe and keep yourself safe and well. Breathe deep, drink lots of water, keep yourself safe and healthy. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Charisse. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Lou. I love you guys so much. I'm in so much in awe of each of you for different reasons and for some similar reasons. And thanks so much. Good night.
Thanks, Afiya.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Don't forget to fill out the survey.
Okay.